Early 1900s bedroom setups, well, they treated heat as something to be trapped, not really generated. By the early 1900s, most homes had limited fuel, inconsistent heat sources, and honestly, no expectation of warming up an entire house. Bedrooms were handled like controlled thermal spaces. Heat was focused right where the body actually rested, not just wasted on empty air. This kind of mindset shaped every single design decision, from where the bed was placed to even what fabric was used. These setups weren't primitive or accidental, not at all. They were deliberate, tested through decades of cold winters, fuel shortages, and those rising costs for coal and wood. What really matters for us today is that these methods worked, and they did it without electricity, thermostats, or any modern insulation. Bed placement was figured out to avoid heat loss, not just for looks. Beds were hardly ever put against exterior walls unless it was absolutely necessary. Beds were pulled several inches away from masonry walls to reduce conductive heat loss. Headboards were often thick, solid wood, not just decorative frames. In colder regions, families added fabric hangings or quilts directly behind the headboard to stop cold air infiltration from cracks in plaster or brick. Applying this today is, well, pretty straightforward. Even in modern homes, exterior walls bleed heat. Pulling the bed 6 to 12 inches away and adding a dense fabric barrier behind the headboard can noticeably reduce nighttime heat loss without even touching the thermostat. Curtains were functional insulation, not just decorative accents. Bedroom curtains in the early 1900s were heavy by modern standards. They were often wool, lined cotton, or layered fabric sewn specifically for winter use. These curtains were closed at dusk and stayed closed until morning. Windows were treated as thermal liabilities. In many homes, a second interior curtain was hung several inches inside the window to create a dead air pocket. This reduced convection currents, where warm air hit cold glass and fell to the floor. Today, blackout curtains alone are often too thin. Adding a second inner layer or using wool blankets clipped behind existing curtains recreates the same insulating effect with minimal cost. One of the most effective but forgotten strategies was the use of bed curtains or half-tester frames. These were not medieval relics but common well into the early 20th century. By enclosing the upper half of the bed, families dramatically reduced the volume of air that needed to be warmed by body heat alone. The temperature inside a curtained bed could be several degrees warmer than the rest of the room. This is directly applicable today. A simple ceiling-mounted curtain rail or a canopy frame with heavy fabric can recreate this effect. The goal is not decoration but airflow control. Even partial enclosures work when they stop rising warm air from escaping. Modern bedding focuses almost entirely on what goes on top of the sleeper. Early 1900s households understood that heat loss downward into cold mattresses and bed frames was just as significant. Now, feather beds, straw ticks, and wool pads were used beneath the sleeper. In colder homes, folks would place an extra blanket under the fitted sheet. This helped keep body heat from being absorbed by those cold materials, you know? Applying this idea today is honestly simple and pretty effective. A wool mattress topper, or even just a folded blanket under your sheet, can cut down on the need for extra top layers, while still making things more comfortable. Back then, bedroom floors were hardly ever bare in the winter. Rugs were layered, sometimes even doubled up, especially around the bed. In poorer homes, folks would use scrap fabric rugs or just folded sacks to get the same effect. Cold air settles low, and uninsulated floors pull heat downward. A rug under and around the bed reduced heat loss and made the entire sleeping area warmer. Today, even well-insulated homes benefit from this principle. Area rugs under the bed reduce radiant heat loss and improve perceived warmth without any energy input. Sleepwear in the early 1900s was designed for warmth, not minimalism. Nightcaps, wool socks, and layered garments were normal. Heat loss through the head was well understood empirically, even if not scientifically articulated. Covering extremities allowed the body to maintain core warmth with less metabolic effort. For modern sleepers, this translates to wearing a light wool cap or socks during cold nights instead of raising the room temperature. Bedrooms were isolated from the rest of the house at night. Doors were closed, draft stoppers were placed along thresholds, and unused rooms were left unheated. In homes with bedroom fireplaces or nearby stoves, heat was often allowed to die down before sleep. The goal was to warm the room and furnishings, not keep a fire burning all night. Thermal mass, yeah, that mattered. So, modern equivalents really just mean warming up a room before bed and then letting it cool down a bit, while you rely on your bedding and insulation instead of keeping the heat running all night. What made these setups work so well wasn't just any one thing, but honestly how everything came together. Bed placement, the kinds of textiles, what you wore, and how you controlled the airflow, all of it added up to a complete thermal strategy. Nothing ever went to waste, and nothing happened by accident. Folks back then understood that keeping warm was something you had to manage smartly, not just something you could buy your way into forever. For preppers and survival-minded viewers, this approach remains relevant. It functions during power outages, fuel shortages, and economic stress. It requires knowledge, not infrastructure. Every method discussed here can be implemented with materials already found in most homes. Heavy fabric, strategic spacing, layered bedding, and airflow control outperform many modern solutions when used correctly. These techniques scale from apartments to rural homesteads and work regardless of climate when adapted thoughtfully. They reduce dependence on external systems and restore a level of control that modern living often removes. If this kind of grounded, historically accurate knowledge matters to you, make sure you subscribe to Warfield Prepper Chronicles, share this guide with others who value practical history, and keep these lessons alive. This isn't nostalgia. It's proven survival knowledge that still works today.